Bring me the book.
The what?
The book. Bring me the book.
Oh, sir, which book? Your library is filled with thousands.
Oh, my son. There's only one book. Bring me the book.
Sir Walter Scott. He was one of Scotland's most famous writers and poets. Now, would anyone like to guess what book that was? Let me give you a hint. It's the greatest selling book of all time.
Is it Don Quixote?
I think you mean Don Quixote. No, that's not correct. In fact, I think you probably just Googled best-selling novels of all time.
Man, you failed me, Google.
Okay, would anyone else like to give it a try?
The Bible?
Claude, you are absolutely correct. The Bible has sold billions of copies, been translated in more than 2,000 languages. In fact, the point of this is that of all the books that Sir Walter Scott had, of all the ones he had access to, it was the Bible that he trusted the most.
What do you mean by trust? Like, it was his favorite book to read?
Well, perhaps he looked to the Bible for guidance, but he trusted it with his very life as he was preparing for eternity.
Okay. Well, why trust the Bible above all books?
And that is a great question, Jennifer. So why would Sir Walter, or any of you, or really anyone else, trust the Bible that much? Now, there are a lot of good reasons for that, but we're only going to focus in on a few. Now, let me ask you this. If you go to history class, how many of you believe that the history you're being taught is basically true? Let me see a show of hands. So I'm guessing that everyone in here is probably familiar with Homer's Iliad. Maybe you got to read it in English class. How many ancient manuscripts do you think we have of this classic piece of literature?
A couple thousand?
Maybe 10,000?
Interesting. Now, here is a manuscript that represents the Bible's New Testament. And here's a manuscript that represents Homer's Iliad. Now, watch this. Now, historians have about 25,000 different manuscripts of the New Testament. 25,000. That is a huge number compared to other books of ancient time. If you look at Homer's Iliad, just short of 650. Now, I want you to consider this. Now, there's some names that you guys have probably heard of. Herodotus, Thucydides, Aristotle, Julius Caesar, Tacitus. Of all those guys, we've only got a few dozen writings from them.
It's full of lies. I guess those history docs on YouTube are as reliable as Superman movies.
Well, Cameron, I would have to agree with you on a lot of those documentaries, but the point I'm trying to make is when it comes to Greek and Roman histories, we only have a very few ancient copies to go with, whereas the Bible is far better supported. It's far more trustworthy in terms of ancient copies and translations.
Okay, but just because we have a bunch of copies of something doesn't make it true.
You're correct, but the interesting thing about the Bible is what we discovered after finding the manuscripts. Anyone remember discussing the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Well, it was a huge find in ancient texts found in Israel. It gave us the oldest copies of the Old Testament and gave us insight in the culture leading up to Jesus.
Wow, Jack, that is a great answer. Everything you said is correct. But let me add a little bit to that. What really makes this amazing is that we have found that the books we have today were preserved correctly. In other words, the books that we have now were the same as the books in the Dead Sea Scrolls, with only a few minor differences, technically called variations.
So do these minor differences even affect the message?
Well, actually, no. For example, a lot of these are just spellings of words as the language developed over time. Now, let me give you an example. The differences were so minor and so few that for the first time in history, it proved that the teachings and the meaning of the Bible had been preserved. Up until we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were a lot of people who felt like the Bible did not really reflect the original and that a lot of things had been lost over time and changed as scribes copied the manuscript. This proved that that argument was incorrect and that the opposite was actually true.
I wish we could go back to using scrolls. It makes way more sense to read that way.
Well, you know, we kind of did. You scroll up and down on your phone and your tablet all the time to read.
Mind blown. Well,
Thanks, Cameron. But I do want to make one last point. The Bible has many eyewitness accounts. It claims to be written by people who saw a lot of amazing things, including, Moses at the parting of the Red Sea, or Daniel in the lion's den, or the resurrection of Christ. But what makes all of these things important is because they are first-hand evidence. People were actually there. Now, if you had a murder, for example, and you found 3 different witnesses, by the time that thing came to trial, all those witness accounts would be taken in as evidence. And the more evidence you have and the more those stories mesh, the more likely it's going to be believed as truth.
So you're saying that a few eyewitnesses validates the account?
Well, yes, because in the New Testament, we have 4 different authors telling 4 different stories from 4 different people that all say that Jesus rose from the dead. Now, if you were in a court of law and a lawyer, that would be a slam dunk. And all of this is evidence to prove that it happened. But as for me, I believe the Bible to be the book, just like Sir Walter Scott did. Now, the reason I believe that is because it's clear to me that the events in the Bible that were recorded happened. It happened to the folks who wrote it, and their lives were changed. Their lives were changed because of an encounter with God. And to this very day, the greatest evidence I see is that it's still changing lives all over the world, including mine. Well, it looks like time is up. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Please remember that we do have a test on Wednesday, chapters 6, 7, and 8.